just because I'm in misery. I'm not asking for no sympathy. But if it's not asking too much, please send me someone to love.
All right. Portland, Oregon, the artichoke. How fun. Well, I'm a rambling man and I ramble all the time. Well, I'm a rambling man and I ramble all the time. A rambling man and I ramble all the time. Oh, Lord, Lord. Every good man's got to ramble when it comes his time. Tell me, how many rivers have you got in Portland town? Tell me, how many rivers have you got in Portland town? How many rivers have you got in Portland town? Mm-hmm. Say the Columbia River is the river that they all run down. Tell me, which way does your Columbia River run? Tell me, which way does that Columbia River run? Or which way does that Columbia River run? Mm-hmm. From the Canadian Rockies to the ocean of the setting sun. Well, I walk down the road and I see your Bonneville Dam. Yeah, I walk down the road and I see your Bonneville Dam. I walk the rocky road and I see your Bonneville Dam. Mm-hmm. Electricity runs the factories making planes for Uncle Sam. Rambling man, yeah, I ramble all the time. Yeah, I'm a rambling man and I ramble all the time. A rambling man and I ramble all the time. Oh, Lord, Lord. Every good man's got to ramble when it comes his time. Said every good man's got to ramble when it comes his time. Even a good man's got to ramble when it comes his time. Oh, thank you. So, Woodrow Wilson Guthrie. He is born July 14th, 1912. He is named after the, at that time, very popular governor of New Jersey, who is going to be elected president later in the fall with the shadow of World War I rising up in Europe. He is born to Charles and Nora Guthrie of Okemah, Oklahoma. It's a little town about 60 miles southwest of Tulsa. Charles and Nora had come west believing that land ownership, owning land, was the secret to the American dream. That's how you created generational wealth. And we think that Charles, at any given time, owned as many as 30 different plots of land in and around Okemah, always looking for that big oil strike that he could never quite catch. Now, Woody also claims that his dad was also a member of the Oklahoma Ku Klux Klan. Now, we don't know that for sure. The historical background on that is a little sketchy. But we do know that even at best, Charles profited from some shady land deals where the Klan ran black farmers off of their land and he was able to buy it at a lower price. When Woody was 7, and his sister would have been, we think, 13 or 14, Woody encountered the force of nature that was going to dog him for the rest of his life, and that was fire. Modern Americans don't really realize or remember it, but once upon a time, in the days before, fire sprinklers and mandatory fire drills, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers in the home, even governmental clothing standards, fires were common and they were deadly. As a matter of fact, schools in America only instituted mandatory fire drills by law after a few years at the beginning of the 20th century. School fires were the #1 cause of child death in the United States for a few years. Then schools instituted mandatory fire drills. Numbers went right down. Makes you think. So, when she was 13 or 14, Woody's older sister, Clara, was killed when she burned to death when her clothing caught fire because she was standing too close to a wood-burning stove during an argument with her mother. The death cast a pall of depression over the Guthrie household that never really lifted. In fact, it got even worse next year when their entire house burnt to the ground. Woody had to go live with his maternal grandmother for a year. Now, Woody speculates in his biography that his mother might have set that fire in a fit of dementia. We don't know that's true. But we do know that around that time, after Clara's death, Nora took to some very strange behaviors. She would suddenly alternate between tears and laughter at a moment's notice. She would be found walking up and down the main streets of Okemah wearing her husband's shoes. She would go indoors into dark movie theaters in the middle of the town and look at the screen, even during the day if there was no movie playing. Now, that might have been due to grief, but she was also feeling the very beginnings of what we now know to have been Huntington's disease. You will sometimes hear it called Huntington's chorea. It is a neurodegenerative muscular disorder. It takes the victim's muscle control away, a lot of times leaving them with only the ability to blink their eyes for yes or no. They can't move at all. It is also genetic, and it took Woody's mom, 2 of his aunts, 2 of his daughters, and eventually in 1967, Woody himself. Well, by the time he was 14, with his father basically destitute due to the fact that he never really did find that oil strike, and his mother institutionalized because of the Huntingtons, it was about time for Woody to hit the road. He decided there was nothing left for him in Okemah. And so, he spent the first few years of the Depression learning useful skills. You know, useful skills. Hopping boxcars, dodging railroad security officers, and of course, strumming chords on a beat-up guitar. Now, he was already starting to travel around and tell the stories through music of the people that he would eventually start calling his people. When he was 19, he decided it was time to settle down. And so he marries Mary Jennings of Pampa, Texas. She becomes his first wife, the mother of his first 3 children. And Woody tried. Oh, he tried. He tried so hard to be a stable provider for that family. But every time he would go and play music out in the world, he just felt like life was happening somewhere else. It was happening out there in places like the Florida Panhandle and Southern California and Chicago and New York. And so sometimes by himself, sometimes with other folk singers, sometimes with his whole family in tow, Woody would go on the road. Eventually, he would wind up on the radio in Southern California, a radio station called KTLA that he was playing on 3 times a day. And by the way, when I say playing on, it doesn't mean they were playing his records. He was going to the station and playing there 3 times. He would play at dinner, he would play at 8 o'clock at night, and then he would play at 11 o'clock when the radio station went off. Whenever I'm talking to my college students, I have to emphasize that last part. It went off. Radio went off. The radio and the TV used to go off. They would stop. They wouldn't show anymore. And my students always ask me, they go, Professor Underwood, what happened? What did you do? I said, we went to bed. Like reasonable, rational people. We went to bed. That's what we did. But yes, he played. He was basically living in the evenings at the radio station. Well, his fame was growing. But also growing was Mary's annoyance with her young husband's inability to pick one place and stay there. One last move north, up to not too far from where we sit right now, was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. 1941, and FDR's REI, Rural Electrification Initiative, was trying to bring electricity to all the hinterlands of the United States, including eastern Oregon and central Oregon and Washington. And the great Grand Coulee Dam was rising up out of the Columbia River as a result. Well, then as now, not everybody was equally excited about damming the mighty waterway. So an organization that you might have heard of that was behind it all, the Bonneville Power Administration, the BPA, had a great idea. They decided they were going to make a documentary movie. They would make a short little documentary that would play in movie theaters in central and eastern Washington and Oregon about the dam and get people excited about the dam. And then you could watch your main feature, your Tarzan film, your Roy Rogers, whatever it was you were going to watch. Well, they hired a documentary filmmaker, a fellow from New York. His name was Steve Kahn, who had made a few of these before. And Kahn was smart. He knew if he was going to make a movie that was going to appeal to and convince regular folks, he couldn't make it like it had always been made. You remember how those documentaries used to look. We all remember them. Remember the excitement when the teacher would pull out the big film projector in school? You were like, movie day! You knew you weren't going to do anything useful. Oh, it was the best day. Well, he knew, you remember all those documentaries, right? They all looked the same, that sort of black and white sepia footage that was skipping frames because it wasn't quite together. And so people were sort of jumping around back and forth and moving a little too fast, shaking hands and then looking out at the camera and smiling. That little sort of faux classical music soundtrack that they all had, yum, bum, bum, bum. It was just a little too happy, a little too peppy. And that same guy who seemed to narrate them all with that stentorian tenor voice, saying sort of, pithy, punny things like, rising up out of the deserts of eastern Washington, free electricity courtesy of Uncle Sam. Well, Kahn knew he couldn't make movies like that if he was going to appeal to regular folks. He needed to make movies with folk music, right? Well, here's the problem. Kahn didn't know any folk musicians, but he knew someone who did. Alan Lomax, if you're a folk music fan, is a name that comes into a lot of folk music stories around this time in American history, and with good reason. He was, at that time, the librarian in the folk music section of the Library of Congress. What he did not know about folk music was not to be known. So, Kahn calls up Lomax and describes the project, says, "Can you think of anybody?" And it is Lomax who put Steve Kahn in touch with Woody Guthrie. Well, Woody is at this time appearing on the radio down in Southern California. Woody, being Woody, mistakenly believes after just one phone call that he's already got the job. So he throws Mary, and by now there are 3 kids, in the back of a borrowed station wagon, heads up the highway here to Portland, Oregon, to BPA headquarters, walks in the door and just says to Steve Kahn, "Well, here I am." That's great. And you would be... "Oh, I'm Woody Guthrie." "Oh, you're Alan's folk singer. That's right. Oh, okay. And well, can you sing me something? Can you play me something?" And he did. And then he played him another one, and another one. And right away, Kahn knew Lomax had nailed it. This was the guy. This was exactly what he needed. This was the music he wanted for his film, and everything would have been perfect, except they kept talking. I don't know if you know much about Woody Guthrie's politics circa 1941, but he was just to the left of, I don't know, Joseph Stalin. And it would have been impossible for any employee of the federal government, which is what the BPA was, let's not forget, to talk to Woodrow Wilson Guthrie for more than 5 minutes without going, "Oh, this guy will never pass a federal employee background check." And it was true, he wouldn't have. Woody was already writing once a week for a paper he euphemistically called the Sabbath Employee. It was the Sunday Worker, it was a communist newspaper. He would never have passed a background check. Luckily, Kahn knows there is such a thing at that time as a 30-day emergency contract, which doesn't have a background check. The only problem is then you only get the employee for 30 days. And so came the million-dollar question. "Well, Woody, how many songs do you think you can write in 30 days? "I don't know. Reckon about 30, I guess." So in May of 1941, the federal government, in the person of the Bonneville Power Administration, hired Woodrow Wilson Guthrie on a 30-day emergency contract. They paid him $266. They gave him one form that had a yes or no box on it. It said, "Are you now or have you ever been a member of any organization that has sought the overthrow of the United States federal government?" Woody took one big pencil, checked no, and off they went. They gave him a big black company car. They gave him a driver, a young fellow named Elmer Bueller. He was only 1 year older than Woody himself. And the two men headed east, out into eastern Washington. There they hooked up with the mighty Columbia River. They followed it back, and they stopped everywhere. They stopped in the dam and talked to the workers and the foremen. They talked in the fields to the farm workers and to the farmers. They found all about the project, and all the time, Woody's sitting with his guitar in the back of that big black car, just strumming, writing. Cars used to have really big back seats. Some of you might remember this. And all the time, they get back to Portland, to the basement of BPA headquarters, and Woody says he's written 30 songs. Well, not quite. Con has now had time to come to grips with Woody's catalog, and so he catches Woody doing what Woody did sometimes, which was to take old chords and old songs and tunes and put new lyrics to them. It wasn't anything as blatant as "This dam is your dam, this dam is my dam, from Portland, Oregon." No, it was nothing that, it was almost that blatant. So they got rid of those, and they had 26 songs left. That's still 26 songs in 30 days. That's an amazing achievement. Well, they record them on acetate. I don't know if any of you know about acetate. It is not something that lasts a long time. It's not designed. They put the acetates in a box. They now put it up on a shelf. They wait for the rest of Con's documentary footage to be finished. And then, as so often happened throughout the 1940s, Adolf Hitler ruined everything. Operation Barbarossa. 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. It becomes very clear the United States is going to enter the war effort, and so everything in every industry stops, and everything puts all its resources towards the war effort, especially the power and energy industry. Con's documentary is stopped. His footage is shelved. Con and Bueller were both drafted. They both served in the European theater in World War II. Thankfully, both of them returned home unharmed. And everything I'm telling you tonight could have been lost to the dustbin of history if it were not for the work of a young media services employee at the BPA in 1983. That's how far we've jumped up now, 1983. Fellow to whom we owe a great debt. He lived in Portland himself until very recently. He's now moved up to Seattle. Had breakfast with him just a few weeks ago. His name is Bill Merlin. We owe him a great deal. He has played on this very stage. He is a musician himself. And it is Bill who finds those acetates, puts them on the machine, hits play, and goes, "Hey, that sounds like Woody Guthrie." He's smart enough. He goes up I-5 to Seattle. He finds a fellow named Greg Vandy, who at that time was the station manager of a radio station in Seattle called KEXP. He was also a music journalist, music historian. The two of them start digging, and they figure out the story of Woody Guthrie and the Columbia River Dam that I'm telling you here tonight. Now, according to Woody's son Arlo, one of the reasons Woody loved that project so much was, he said, his dad had always felt like he was on the outside of the machine looking in. And just this one time, says Arlo, his father felt like he was on the inside. And not just on the inside, but on the inside of a world-changing, nature-challenging, bigger than anything has ever been before thing. Sorry. Hard to do that. But you can hear that amazement on some of those 26 songs like Biggest Thing That Man Has Ever Done, songs like Better World A Comin', and of course, Washington State's official state folk song. Did you know Washington State had an official state folk song? It does. It's one of the few that do, and you're about to sing it with me. bet a lot of you know it already. Now, when it comes to singing along, my rules are the same as Woody's. If you know the words, sing out loud. And if you don't, sing out louder. It makes the person sitting next to you feel better about themselves. Green Douglas firs where the waters cut through. Down her wild mountains and canyons she flew. Canadian Northwest to the ocean so blue. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. How's it go? Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Other great rivers add power to you. Yakima, Snake, and the Crooked Tattoo. With the Sandy, Willamette, and the Hood River too. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. Let's do it again. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. At Bonneville now there are ships in the locks. The water has risen and cleared all the rocks. Now shiploads aplenty will steam past the docks. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. Let's do it again. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. And up on that river's the Grand Coulee Dam, the mightiest thing ever built by man to run the great factories and water the land. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. You take this one. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. Won't you roll on, Columbia, roll on. Oh, you sound great. You're hired. Get in the van. Cool. Well, by the time the project was over, the mighty dam rose 550 feet above the river. It cost $163 million by the time it was done in 1943, and it employed 8,000 men. Now, those are impressive numbers, but it did not escape Woody that those men made an average of 80 cents an hour, and that 77 of them died on that project before it was over. He had also seen in the fields and the farms that were getting irritated too. Some of them were getting fairly irrigated. He had noticed who was doing what work and who was and was not getting paid for it. Woody always saw a little bit more than you meant him to see. And so some of those 26 songs had a little bit more of an edge, like Pastures Aplenty. It's a mighty hard road that my poor hands have held. My poor feet have traveled your high, dusty road. Well, out of your dust bowl and westward we rode. Your deserts were hot and your mountains were cold. I worked in your orchards of peaches and prunes, and I slept on the ground by the light of your moon. On the edge of your city you'll see us, and then we come with the dust and we go with the wind. California, Arizona, I harvest your crops, Then it's up north to Oregon to gather your hops and pull the beets from your ground, cut the grapes from your vine to lay on your table your light sparkling wine. Green pastures of plenty from the dry desert ground, from the Grand Coulee Dam where the waters come down, and every state in the Union us migrants have been. We'll work in this fight and we'll fight till we win. Well, it's always we ramble this river and I. All along your green fields I will work till I die, and my land I'll defend with my life if need be, 'cause your pastures of plenty must always be free. Thank you. Well, both songs went on to become classics, but I think it would be safe to say the BPA far preferred the first one to the second. Well, now he was imbued with a newfound patriotism, and Woody decided for his next thing he wanted to go to New York City. And there in New York City, he was going to hook up with a group called the Almanac Singers. Now, the Almanac Singers just predated the Weavers by a little bit, but they even shared some members. It was a loose affiliation of folk singers, had some people you might have heard in it, people like Lee Hayes, Pete Seeger. Woody wanted to go and join up with that group. He'd had an invitation. Mary, who by now was realizing there was never going to be an end to the wandering, said she was taking the three kids, Gwendolyn, Kristen, and little Bill, and she was going back home to Texas, to El Paso this time. And she told Woody if he went to New York, their marriage was over. Woody, who by now was appearing on the radio regular, he had concerts booking, he had some steady income coming in. He promised to send her and the kids $100 a month, which was not a small sum in those days. And he went to New York. New York City had the attraction for Woodrow Wilson Guthrie of the Almanac Singers, but also other folk luminaries like Leadbelly and Cisco Houston and Burl Ives, other people he knew. It also had other activists, folks like the famous actor at the time, Will Geer, if any of you remember Grandpa Walton from the Waltons TV show. Oh, he was quite the socialist firebrand before he was wishing John Boy good night every week. He had an apartment where they had all kinds of radical parties, and they'd sit around till the wee hours of the morning talking about the problems with private property as a concept and the way the world ought to be. It was at one of these parties that Woody meets a young dancer from the Martha Graham Dance Company. Her name is Marjorie Mazia. They started to date. She would go on to become his second wife, the mother of his next 4 children, and the woman who would return, even though they were no longer married, to nurse him at the end of his life. She is by far the longest relationship in Woody's life. But, as some of you may know, New York City winters get very cold. And by February, Woody had had it. He had had it. He had had it. He was living hand to mouth in the Hanover House Hotel, which is not the Ritz-Carlton, and he felt like wherever he went in New York, he could not get away from that song. Oh, that song was everywhere. He felt like you could walk down the street, and when the department store doors opened up, you heard that song blaring out. As you walked down the street, if there were cabs and their windows were down, you could hear it coming from their radio. You go home, you turn on your radio, and it's at various places as you spin the dial. Everywhere. Kate Smith singing Irving Berlin's God Bless America. Oh, he hated that song. He hated that song so much. And he didn't just hate it because it was everywhere. He hated it because at that time in American history, he felt like to his people, that song was a cruel joke. He looked around at his people and he didn't see God blessing America. He saw his people suffering from job insecurity, food insecurity, homelessness, and lack of shelter. He didn't feel like he saw God blessing America. So one night in February, he comes home to his little room. He turns on the radio. Click, turns it back off, goes over to his notebook, rips out one page, takes it over to his desk. We still have it. It is in the centerpiece. It is on a lit dais at the Woody Guthrie Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You must go. It is a wonderful museum. And the Bob Dylan Museum is right next door on the same street. It is an amazing weekend for the folk music aficionado if you want to go. But this is the centerpiece of it. And he takes that one piece of paper and he writes down a series of verses that he calls God blessed, ED, past tense, blessed America. Now, you know that song. Even if you don't know, you know it. You know it by the name it got later, which is This Land Is Your Land. And that song became so popular that President LBJ once said that that song and not the Star-Spangled Banner should be America's national anthem. Now, neither LBJ nor the thousands of elementary school children we make sing that song in choir concerts every year know the real history of that song. And most of them have never heard the two verses that got cut from the 1947 recording when Woody first sat down to record that song. Verses that have a problem with the very idea of private property. For instance, this one doesn't get done much. Was a high wall standing that tried to stop me. A sign was painted, said private property, but on the backside it didn't say nothing. God blessed America for me. Or what used to be the last verse of the song before it got cut. One bright sunny morning, in the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people as they stood hungry. I stood there wondering if God blessed America for me. Now, when Woody went to record that song in 1947 for the first time with the great folk music producer Mo Ash at the controls, when Mo heard those two verses, he reached over and hit stop. And then he got on the talkback mic. Woody, yeah, we can't do those two verses. Nobody's ever going to play this song on the radio. Why not? Why not? Tell me. Well, you make it sound like America's too in love with capitalism and doesn't take care of its poor people. Okay, let's just take a smoke break. Oh, boy. How about those first two lines? This land is your land, this land is... that might be a good time. Now, let's be clear. Woody would never have agreed to the lyric or the title change or the cuts if he knew that was going to become his most associated with, most iconic song. But at that time, it was just another song. It was one song among many. In fact, he already had a bigger hit. The first naval ship sunk in World War II was actually a destroyer class called the Reuben James. It was sunk on Halloween night, about a month before Pearl Harbor. Well, it made all the papers, and Woody sat down and wrote a few verses, and it became one of the first real anthems of World War II. And a big hit. Have you heard of a ship called the Good Reuben James? manned by hard-working men, both of honor and fame. She flew the stars and stripes in the land of the free, but tonight she's in her grave on the bottom of the sea. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? What were their names, tell me what were their names. Did you have a friend on the good Reuben James? Now, it is at that point in the show every night where I can generally tell who the guitar players are in the audience. Because when I play that little riff, and I say that's a Woody Guthrie song, I always see a few heads kind of tilt to the corner like, that's not right. Kind of like your dog does when you're not at home and your voice comes out of the answering machine during a call. Your dog kind of, that's not right. Okay. Yes, if you are a fan of, acoustic, mountain, Appalachian, bluegrass, old-timey string music, or as we call it where I come from, back in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, music, then you know that that song is a song by the Carter family. It's famously called Wildwood Flower, right? And it is the first lick, it's a very famous lick, that a young guitar player, maybe a young skinny boy running around the mountains of Asheville, picks up a guitar. It's the first lick that you learn if you want to play a little bluegrass. Oh, he taught me to love him and call me his flower. That was blooming to cheer him through life's dreary hour. Oh, I long so to see him and regret the dark hour. He's the one that neglected this pale wildwood flower. See? That's the same song. Now, I can see we're turning on Woodrow. Hang on for just a second. Let me take you back even farther to around 1850, musicologically, to a song that we think comes from somewhere near the North Carolina-Tennessee border. A song so famous that young men were whistling it and singing it as they walked off 10 years later to sign up for the Civil War. It's called I'll Twine with My Mingles. Oh, I'll twine with my mingles and raven black hair, with the roses so red and the lilies so fair, and the myrtle so bright with the emerald dew, pale and the leader and eyes look like blue. Same song. Now, I say this not just to bail Woody out of trouble, or certainly to accuse Mama Maybelle and Papa AP of anything, perish the thought, but just to show you that's kind of how folk music worked. Everybody took old tunes and put new lyrics with them. Pete Seeger did it, Leadbelly did it, Woody did it, everybody did it, and we didn't talk about copyright infringement and all those sorts of things. That's just kind of how folk music was working. Well, by the time we get to the spring of 1943, things are going pretty good for Woodrow Wilson Guthrie. He has married Marjorie. They have moved out of New York City proper and to the little house on Mermaid Avenue in Coney Island, where they would live for their entire marriage. They have had their first child in February of 1943. Her name was Kathy Ann, the little baby that Woody would always call Stack of Bones, one word, Stack of Bones, because she was so skinny. His first memoirs, called Bound for Glory, had been published by Dutton Publishing, and it was flying off the shelves because Woody's a great writer and a good storyteller. He was playing with the Almanac Singers. They were getting booked everywhere. They had changed their lyrics to be a little bit more pro-war in their songs, too. And it looked like the Guthrie family was set for a time of solidness, prosperity, and stability. And then came the knock on the door. and who was on the other side of that knock and all the craziness that it led to is what we're going to talk about in Act 2 when I come back. So I'm going to take a little break, and I certainly encourage you to avail yourselves of some libations at the bar. Use the facilities if you want. Please do remember to take care of your wait staff and your bar staff who are taking such good care of you. You can make donations to the Artichoke itself, who I am very glad to have me here in Portland, and we'll be back in about 10 or 15. She's not used to the humidity, sorry. She's used to a little bit, well, it's a little different there. I am an Olympian, yes. Not like today. Today was intense.
Today's just hot.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're all right. I know, I'm just a wuss. Holy crap. I'm just always surprised when everyone comes back. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I ain't got no home, I'm just a rambling round. I'm a hard-working worker, go from town to town. The police make it hard wherever I may go. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. My brothers and my sisters are on this bitter road. It's a hard, weary road my tired feet have tried. My wife up and died here on this cabin floor. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. As I look around, it's awful strange to see. This world is a weird and funny place to be. The gambling man is rich and the working man is poor. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. By the spring of 1943, Marjorie Guthrie had learned that whenever Cisco knocked on the door, it meant Woody was leaving. Sometimes for a night, sometimes for a few, sometimes for a week or more. But that knock meant that her new husband was feeling the itch, as they came to call it. Either that or Cisco himself had an idea of where the two men needed to go and what they needed to be doing there. Either way, the knock would come. With it, the promise of a new journey, and Woody would be gone again. Gilbert Cisco Houston was a folk singer, activist, and actor of the World War II and post-war eras. He was also Woody Guthrie's constant sidekick. In many ways, the two men were exact opposites. Woody was short, Cisco was tall. Woody had a high tenor voice that could carry out over a crowd without a microphone. Cisco had a deep, mellifluous cowboy crooner voice. He had actually been a cowboy crooner in some of the early cowboy movies. Woody had a wiry mop of hair. Cisco had this Robert Redford surfer boy, California blonde hair, even a pencil-thin mustache. And he had a deep southern accent from his Virginia upbringing. He convinced Woody to do things like work for both of FDR's election campaigns, hot boxcars, and go up and down the West Coast unionizing migrant farm workers, all sorts of things. And now he knocked on the door and he said, "Hey, Woody, get your guitar, man. You and me and Jim, we're going on down to the Merchant Marine headquarters. We're going to sign up. We're going to go fight the Nazis." Now, Cisco had already done some merchant marine sailing, and he desperately wanted to be part of the World War II naval effort. He had done some sailing with his twin brother Slim, and they had looked out for each other, and that's what you need to do because both of them knew that they could never pass a military eye test. You see, both the brothers suffered from a condition called nystagmus. It takes away the center of your eye, and leaves you with the periphery, and you can see sort of light and dark. Cisco never drove a car, and he knew that he could never pass a military physical. So he had a plan. He was going to go down to Merchant Marine headquarters with his friend Woody Guthrie and their other new friend, Jim Longy. Now, Jim was a New York lawyer. He had just graduated from Columbia Law School, passed the New York bar, and he was unionizing workers on the docks in New York. So the three of them were going to go down to Merchant Marine headquarters, and they were going to stand in the physical line. And when they got to the eye test, they would stand Woody, then Jim, then Cisco behind. So basically, Woody would come up, read the eye chart as loud as he could, and then Jim was going to, read the eye chart as loud as he could, and both times Cisco would listen, and then when he got up to the line, he'd just recite what he had heard. Well, that was the plan. Well, as they get closer and closer to the eye doctor in the line, it becomes apparent the plan's not going to work. The doctor's having different people read different lines on the eye chart. And so Jim gets up and very dejectedly reads his line, and Woody gets up and very dejectedly reads his line. And when Cisco finally makes it to the end, Jim, in a flash of inspiration, knocks into the eye doctor accidentally, knocking all his clipboards and charts down to the ground. And while Jim is down on the ground, helping the doctor put everything together, Woody yells out in his best Cisco impersonation, BR549K23 of the line. But doctor passed him right on through. Woodrow Wilson Guthrie walked on to the first of his 3 Liberty ships, the first of his 3 merchant marine voyages across the Atlantic in World War II, somehow carrying his sea bag, a guitar, a mandolin, a fiddle, 10 books, and a small portable typewriter. Witnesses said the man looked like a walking pawn shop. The William B. Travis, or as its crew affectionately called it, the Willie B., was bound for first Gibraltar and then into the Mediterranean to Palermo. Then it would turn around and head back for New York. That was the plan. The sailors had hoped for a nice, calm cargo, maybe some foodstuffs, maybe uniforms, textiles, perhaps the odd parachute. And so they watched in horror as over the course of several days, the dock worker loaded them a ship full of munitions and dynamite. One torpedo from the U-boats that were hungrily prowling the water out there in the Atlantic, and there would be no need for life jackets or lifeboats. Woody and Cisco were actually kind of philosophical, kind of fatalistic about it. Jim, who had never been at sea at all before, was a nervous wreck the whole time. From the start, the other two conspired to sort of hide and compensate for Cisco's disability. For instance, when it was time to volunteer for combat positions, Cisco and Jim volunteered to load the gigantic 5-inch guns. All they had to do was be down in the loading room. Jim had to turn to the rack, take a shell, turn, hand it to Cisco. Cisco didn't even have to step. He just had to turn 180 degrees, hand it to the gunner. Gunner slams it in and yells to fire. Easy. Blind man could do it. Okay? Whenever they had lifeboat drills, Woody always made sure that Cisco had one person in front of him and one person behind him. One person in front of him that he could put his hand on their shoulder and make sure that Cisco didn't miss stairways or ladders, and one person behind him to put their hand on his head, Cisco was tall, and push him down so he didn't bang his head on the hatchways when they would do their speed drills. Now, their true job that all 3 of them had signed up for when they were becoming merchant seamen was messmen. Now, for those of you who've never been in the service before, the mess man doesn't cook your food, but they serve you your food. So imagine, for instance, a breakfast where you have to serve 50 gunners who were promised when they signed up that every morning they could get their eggs to order. Oh, it was incredibly chaotic. And now, this was the point where Cisco and Jim would cover for Woody, because Woody Guthrie, especially on that first voyage, was a bad mess man. He would get distracted setting up the mess areas. He would doodle and write lyrics on the back of the menu sheets. We still have them in the archives. He would focus on one sort of little thing with the place settings as opposed to, getting the beverages and coffee ready. And Jim and Cisco would spend a lot of time running back and forth between his mess and theirs, doing double duty to cover for him. Well, things got a lot easier when the sailors began to realize that if they cleaned their own dishes after the meal, if they cleared their own plates and cups and silverware, which was supposed to be the mess man's job, Woody Guthrie would have more time to sing for them after meals. So supposedly, he had been on ship for only about 24 hours when he wrote this. In bed with my woman, just singing the blues. Heard the man on the radio saying the news of the big red army took 100 towns. Allies are dropping them 2-ton bombs. Started hollering, dancing, hopping up and down like a bullfrog. Doorbell rang and in come a man. I signed my name, got a telegram. Said, if you want to take a little vacation trip, I got a dishwashing job on a Liberty ship. Woman a-flying, me a-crying, out the door and down the line. About 2 minutes and I run 10 blocks. I come to my ship, she was down at the docks. I walked up the plank, signed my name again. They blowed that whistle, we was gone again. Woman, waiting. Ship slowed down with TNT, stretched all the way out across the sea, and I stood on the deck watching fishes swim. I'm just praying them fish weren't made out of tin. No, it's sharks and porpoises and jellyfish and fish all over that water. This convoy's the biggest that I ever did see, stretches all the way out across the sea. Yeah, the ship's ringing whistles, ringing their bells, gonna blow them fascists all to hell. Win some freedom, liberty, stuff like that. Walk to the tail, look down at the stern, looking at that big brass screw blade turn. Listen to the sound of the engine pound, gained 16 feet every time it turned around. Getting closer, closer. Look out, you fascists. I'm just one of this merchant crew. I belong to a union called the NMU. I'm a union man, head to toe. I'm USA, I'm CIO. Fighting out here on the water to bring some freedom on the land. Well, he contributed to the shipboard culture in other ways as well. When he saw that all his fellow crewmen were nervous about the explosive cargo and also about where they were in the convoy. They were in the dreaded coffin corner, the place you don't want to be. It's the last few ships at the back of the convoy. Apparently the German U-boats like to swing in behind and pick off the ships from the back first. So Woody decided they needed to pick up some speed. So he went down to the hold, and as they got emptied out the food crates, he would take the lumber from the crates and take them up on deck. He found some hammer and nails somewhere, and he starts building this thing. It's like a tower. It's lashed to the rail on the side. We don't have any pictures of it, sadly. He called it the wind machine. It was a sort of a cross between like a windmill and a weather vane. It just kept going up and up and up. And if anybody ever asked him what it was, Woody wouldn't stop hammering. He wouldn't even take the nails out of his mouth. He'd just go, "Wind machine, going to help us pick up some speed, outrun the U-boats." Well, they all laughed at him until after a few days, one sailor came by and said, "Well, if you're making a wind machine, I mean, you need to put the..." And he makes a design suggestion, and then another sailor finds him some nails, and then some more bring him lumber. And by the time they get close to Gibraltar, it's an all-hands-on-deck project. Everybody's helping make the amazing wind machine. Well, the wind machine got blown overboard in a force 4 storm about 4 days before they hit Gibraltar, but it did its job, and it distracted the crew on a very stressful voyage. Well, they go through Gibraltar, they get to Palermo, where they spent 3 weeks docked while very slowly everybody unloaded their explosives and their munitions. Now, at this point, they're supposed to turn around and head back for New York. They do not. They get new orders. They are now supposed to turn south and go across the Mediterranean at its narrowest point, and now they are taking a new cargo. They are taking 75 military police officers to Tunis in North Africa. Oh, and another wrinkle, even though those waters are known to be prowling with German U-boats, they're going alone. They get no naval destroyer escort. Well, they make Tunis. On the night of September 13th, they offload their military police officers and they turn for home. Their luck was incredible. If they had still had their MPs, they would have been way over the lifeboat limit. If they had still had their explosive cargo, the resulting explosion would have been seen up and down the coast of Morocco. As it was, the torpedo that hit the William B. Travis that night as the day shift hit their bunks knocked everybody around pretty good, but it only injured those who had been right by the blast site. Now the captain has a choice to make. The boat's sinking, but he doesn't know how fast. He has two choices. He can either make for Bizerte, which is the nearest port, with the pumps going down in the hold, or he can order a full abandoned ship to the lifeboats. He chooses Bizerte. Now, when the divers went down later in the dock, after the ship had made Bizerte, and they came back up and they held their hands this far apart to show him how big the hole was, the captain later said if he'd known it was that big, he would have ordered abandoned ship. You have to put yourself in their place, right? They're floating in the dark in the Mediterranean all by themselves. That U-boat could still be out there. They don't know where it is. One more torpedo hit could sink the ship in as little as 2 minutes, and the hold is full of merchant mariners who are frantically manning the pumps as they race for the African coast. All the rest of the mariners have mustered out onto deck in their life jackets and their helmets, ready for the lifeboats, trying to think, I guess, lightweight thoughts. I don't know. It is at this point that Woody Guthrie, feeling the need to say something important, if this is it, feels the need to yell out into the Mediterranean darkness, "God bless the Red Army!" It earns him a quick punch in the nose from one of his fellow soldiers. And his buddies, who kind of felt like he had this one coming, let it go. Well, they made Bizerte. Another merchant ship called the Erickson picks them up, gets them back to New York. They all spend Christmas of 1943 home with their families. But then, after New Year's Day, here comes Cisco again, and he feels like they need to reform the trio. He's got Jim with him, and Woody, who has returned home to a mailbox stuffed full of draft notices from the regular army, decides he's going to sign up and go with them. Master A.N. Bonless of the ship the William Floyd reports that on January 13, in his ship's log, their boat was supposed to leave New York Harbor, go down to Baltimore, pick up some stores, go down to Virginia, pick up a few more, and then head out, this time for the North African coast, once again going across the Atlantic. Now, the second voyage of Woody Guthrie's, in many ways, was the most normal of his three. It is certainly the only one that he leaves and comes back on the same ship. But that doesn't mean it was without challenges. You see, it was on the William Floyd that Woody Guthrie fought his greatest enemy of World War II, and it was not Nazis or U-boats or mines or torpedoes. It was poker. Now, merchant mariners play a lot of poker. You see, between the lifeboat drills and the gun drills, there's often hours and hours of nothing to do, and shipboard gambling becomes kind of a cottage industry. Woody Guthrie was a terrible poker player. I mean, he was really bad. The openness and the emotion that served him so well as a musical artist betrayed him around the poker table. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world. As some of you may know, it is possible to be let's say, a not great gambler and still go to a casino and have a fun night at the tables, provided you know your limitations. Woody Guthrie, however, was apparently that kind of gambler that friends and family bemoan and for which professional card sharks give profound thanks. The bad card player who believes himself to be a good card player. That was Woody. Cisco later said in an interview near the end of his life, yeah, man, Woody thought he was a good card player, but he just wasn't, man. I mean, he just wasn't. Now, the ship's log of the William Floyd backs Cisco up. If you've ever seen a merchant marine log, and trust me, when I was doing my research for my thesis, I saw a lot of them. They're all basically the same. The last few pages are an accounts ledger. Sailors could get advances on their salary while they were out on the ocean. It's called slop, okay? You could get slop. And every sailor has a series of lines under his name for some debits. And by far the biggest reason for getting slop was gambling debts, right? So almost every sailor on a merchant marine voyage has some debits for $15, $20. March 13th, 1944, Woodrow Wilson Guthrie asks for and receives a slop advance, according to the William Floyd ship's log, of $100. And he would exceed that one later on. Now keep in mind, the entire pay for an entire voyage for a sailor of Woody's rank would be about $250. And keep in mind as well, he is keeping his promise to send $100 every month back to Mary and the kids in El Paso. So for a 3-week voyage, half of his salary is gone in child support the moment he steps foot on the deck. So the result of all this is that he often had to write Marjorie and little Kathy Ann and explain why he would be coming home with nothing to contribute to the family coffers. One such letter goes a little like this. To hell with poker. It is an awful pastime. Does nothing more for the brain than smoking opium. It makes enemies of friends because friends cannot rob friends and stay friends. I am a $50 loser already, and I will be damned if I ever set foot at a poker table again. From a letter dated 2 days later. Everybody's playing poker. I tried to get in, but they won't take no more than 6 at a table, so I guess I'll just sit over here in the mess room and write you, which is probably a better use of my time. You have to know the main thing that Woody did on most of these voyages was writing. I mean, he wrote letters. Sometimes he would go for stretches where he would write a letter home to Marjorie and little Kathy Ann Stack of Bones every single day. He would talk about what he was doing on the boat. He would talk about how much he missed them. And always, 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 he's begging for more frequent letters back in return, begging for them to write him back more. One particular one in early August of 1943 is my favorite. He's writing to little Kathy Ann, even though she's just a baby, can't read it. And he's trying to explain to her someday in the future why he's gone and assure her that he's going to come back. He says he's out on the ocean. And isn't the ocean where the rain lives? Doesn't the rain go away? But doesn't the rain always come back? He says, you see, Stack of Bones, when the rain pitter-pats against your window, why, it's just water asking if you got any work for it to do. And if you say no, why, it just laughs at you and calls you lazy, heads on down to the ground and commences to making beautiful trees and grasses grow. See, beautiful things aren't here, honey, to lull you into some kind of land of dreams. They're here to show you how good your time can be if you just apply yourself. Well, once they made North Africa, once they made North Africa, Woody had to deal with a level of poverty that challenged him to keep it emotionally together. You know, it's interesting. Woody's friends, even his friends in the folk music world, they actually describe him as pretty stoic. You know, you could get a smile or a grin out of him, but very few people remember clearly seeing Woody Guthrie laugh out loud. And he would say very nice things about you to other people, but almost never said them to your face. For instance, lots of people would come up to Jim Longy and they would go, Woody Guthrie says you've got the best anti-fascist mind he's ever seen. Never said that to Jim himself. My personal theory is that Woody equated emotional display with his mother's loss of control when he was a young man. Well, now they got to North Africa, and the poverty and the deprivation that he saw challenged him. Absolutely. Both Cisco and Jim write in their letters about seeing young boy children try to pimp even younger sisters to the soldiers and to the sailors. Starving hunger was everywhere. And the niceties of life, too. For instance, Woody figured out when they got there that the Algerians particularly prized cleanliness societally, but they didn't have always the means to achieve it. Soap was apparently very hard to get your hands on. Soap? Well, on a merchant marine vessel, soap is the one thing. You got so much you don't know what to do with. So at their next union meeting, Woody and Cisco and Jim stood up and they said, hey, listen, everybody, when we get our next soap ration, take just what you need, give us the rest, and we'll take it ashore at the next port. By the time they got to Oran Harbor, which was their next port, the three of them had 250 bars of soap in 3 pillowcases. They went ashore with no real plan for distribution. They almost caused a riot among the local children as they were trying to distribute all this soap. Luckily, the 3 of them had brought their guitars. And they calmed the kids down and charmed them with a quick little concert. This was apparently one of their favorites. There's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. There's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. When we beat 'em on the land and in the sea and in the sky, there's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. There's a better world a-comin', can't you see, see? There's a better world a-comin', can't you see? When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world a-comin', can't you see? There's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. There's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. We will beat 'em on the land and in the sea and in the sky. There's a better world a-comin', I'll tell you why. Oh, the kids loved it. The kids follow the 3 of them back en masse. So many of them on the pier beside the ship, they're scared the pier is going to fall over. All these little kids, all these little Algerian kids holding up their 2 new bars of soap in their both hands, chanting, Woody, 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 as they follow him back. He did it again. His incredible combination of charisma and compassion carried the day. Those gifts would be stretched to their limit on the final voyage. From the beginning, that 3rd voyage across the Atlantic on a ship called the Sea Porpoise seemed not quite right. Sailors are a superstitious lot at the best of times, and there was a lot about this ship that had people grumbling that it was bad luck. Hatches didn't close quite right. Heaters didn't work quite right, making for some cold nights on the Atlantic. Cisco said, the mess is set up all wrong on this ship. And you could tell because this was by far the most crowded ship they'd been on. Their cargo this time? Soldiers. 300 infantry troops, fresh from basic training in Texas. Oh, and everybody was very stressed. Because their orders were that these soldiers had to get exactly to their drop-off point on the exact day they were supposed to be there. Woody had never heard of it. Some beach on the coast of Normandy. Now, Jim, who had never gotten used to being at sea, was a nervous wreck all the time. He could do math. He had been on one sinking Liberty ship already. He knew that with all those men below decks, if they took one torpedo, like the Willie B. Travis had, hundreds of men, while they sank, could be consigned to a watery grave trying to get up the hatches and the ladders and the stairways. He later told a journalist, "I would have slept in the lifeboats if they had let me." Well, all three men were up on deck one night in May, trying to stay close to those precious lifeboats when a storm blew in off the coast of Ireland. Now, suddenly, it's something out of Jim's worst nightmare. The prow is heaving up and down. He's starting to get seasick. He hadn't been seasick in forever. And suddenly, in the waters around them, they heard the telltale sound. Depth charges. They were under attack. Their destroyers had sighted submarines. They knew submarines were out there and were sending out depth charges. Now it's like something out of hell. The prow is going up and down in the waves. The rain is coming in sideways. Nobody can see. They stand just as good a chance of getting run over by one of their own ships that can't see them in the dark. It's terrible. Now they're under attack from a German U-boat. It is at this moment that Woody Guthrie realizes the hold is full of young sailors who are probably scared to death. They've probably never been away from their homes in Texas before, let alone out in the ocean. And he yells over the storm to the other two, "Come on! We got to get downstairs! We got to take their minds off this mess!" "What do you mean?" says Cisco. "We got to play for them!" And he grabs his guitar out from a nearby hatch. Excuse my language, but Jim looks at him and goes, "You are out of your fucking mind," okay? But, as Woody did his whole life, he didn't look behind him. He just went down into the hold and assumed they'd follow. And Cisco and Jim, taking a second to look at each other and just sort of shrug, did. They went right after him. Jim says they loved it. Crazy. Goddamn folk hootenanny happening with depth charges blowing on the other side of the hull. Song after song after song. They were going crazy. So they didn't even know when it ended. That's how much those soldiers loved it. That, he said, was the magic of Woody Guthrie. He put his hands on us and he made us heroes. Well, at the beginning of July, the Porpoise gets its orders that it's supposed to go to a section of the Cottontaine Peninsula known as Utah Beach. Offload its troopers. Now, this is not the crazy hellscape of D-Day on Omaha Beach a month before that, but still you've got German guns farther inland randomly lobbing shells overhead, and now all the Texans get out on deck in their full combat gear. They're waiting for the whistle that's going to tell them to go over the rails and climb down the nets and get into the amphibious boats and head for the beach. Woody and Jim and Cisco get out on the deck with them. They've made some friends, and they start to get letters. Lots of letters, all kinds of letters, armfuls of letters, all that the soldiers want them to send back to Texas. And they promise, yeah, we'll get them back there. We'll get them back to the Yellow Rose State just as fast as we can. And just as they're saying it, there's the whistle. And all of them go over the rail and down. And Woody said it felt like the ship lifted with all that weight off of it. As they're floating away, the commander of the Texans puts one of his boots up on the prow of the amphibious boats and takes his bullhorn, turns back to the ship, and he says, "Thank you, Sea Porpoise," and salutes. Several of the young Texans turn back toward the ship and smile and wave. And Woody and Jim and Cisco, with their hands full of letters, wave back. And then they were gone, racing for the contested sands of France. Well, the Porpoise got new orders to go up to Omaha Beach, rendezvous with some other merchant boats, and then convoy back to New York. And that's how Woodrow Wilson Guthrie spent July 4th of 1944 quietly strumming This Land Is Your Land on his guitar a few hundred yards off Omaha Beach. Ship's log records that night, the Sea Porpoise was rocked by yet another explosion. This time, everybody gets knocked to the ground. Jim gets actually knocked unconscious. He just comes to, and Cisco's slapping him, getting him up to the deck. The first thought was that they've been hit by another torpedo. No, they have run over a mine, a floating mine off of Omaha Beach. Well, they're not sinking, but the engine room is disabled. So they get towed into the famous shipyards at Southampton. Everybody gets offloaded. Now you have to remember, with the Merchant Marine, when you're not on the boat, you're not on the clock. You're not in the Merchant Marines anymore if you're not on deck. You're not getting paid. And so all three of the men stood on the pier with their sea bags and their guitars, and they looked back at the town, and they looked out at the ocean, and they looked back at the town, and they kind of didn't know what to do next. Woody's discharge papers from the Merchant Marines give a date of July 12th. Well, he had an invitation from a BBC radio producer that he'd met back in New York that if he was ever on her side of the Atlantic, he should come be on her Children's Hour radio show. So around that time, we have a recording of Woody Guthrie on the BBC Children's Hour, of all things. He didn't really know what to do. He did his favorite train songs, and then he urged the kids at home to sing along with this one. I'm gonna let you drive the car, I'm gonna let you drive the car. Vroom, vroom, beep, 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 take you riding in my car. I'm gonna send you home again, I'm gonna send you home again. Vroom, vroom, beep, 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 take you driving in my car. I'm gonna let you blow the horn, I'm gonna let you blow the horn. Arrgh, beep, 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 take you riding in my car. Well, I'm gonna let you drive the car, I'm gonna let you drive the car. Vroom, vroom, beep, 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 take you riding in my car. Well, they're not on the Merchant Marine anymore, but the American Red Cross says that if they can make it up to Glasgow, there's another merchant vessel that'll take them back to New York. Woody jumps on a train. He says the Scottish people are about the nicest people he's ever met. And in September of that year, Woodrow Wilson Guthrie walked down the gangplank safely in New York Harbor. He had been across the Atlantic 3 times with his 2 buddies. He had dodged U-boats, torpedoes, mines. He had sung on 2 different continents, lost hundreds of dollars in poker, written literally hundreds of letters, but here he was, safe, sound, back in New York again. Not everybody had a happy homecoming. Upon returning, Cisco found out that his twin brother Slim had been lost on another merchant vessel in the North Atlantic. Apparently, he had been down in the engine room when they'd taken a torpedo. The ship had sunk in about 2 minutes, and he didn't have 2 friends to make sure that he always had somebody in front of him and behind him. And he had gone down with the ship. Cisco, who was beyond grief, got on a plane, said goodbye to his friends, and went back to California to tell their elderly mother. Woody didn't have the happy homecoming he was looking for either. You see, it was on that 3rd voyage that he had begun to feel the hand tremors that were the beginning signs of Huntington's chorea. According to Jim, he never used the word Huntington's. You never heard Woody use the word Huntington. He called it the thing. Yeah, I got my mom's thing. Yeah, I'm feeling the thing today. Yeah, I got my thing, you know. But one of the things that Jim always felt was that Woody wrote and produced so much so fast because in his head, he always heard a ticking clock. Gilbert Cisco Houston played folk music up and down the West Coast all throughout the 50s. He did well but he still had to sell encyclopedias door to door from time to time to make ends meet. Luckily, he happened to be back in New York in 1947 when his constant companion needed him the most. When, for the second time in Woody Guthrie's life, a young girl was taken by the fire. Kathy Ann Guthrie, little stack of bones, died at the age of 4, 1947, when her clothing caught fire, when she was standing too close to a wood-burning stove in their house on Coney Island. She lingered for 3 days in a New York pediatric intensive care ward and then passed. Marjorie was bereft, but she was already pregnant with their next child, and there was nothing she could do but keep going. The night of Kathy Ann's death, Cisco followed Woody a few steps behind him, not saying anything, not touching him, as Woody walked down to the beach at Coney Island. According to Cisco, he stared out at the ocean, and then suddenly, Woody Guthrie, who never really liked to show emotion, turned back around, threw himself down on the sand, and for 5 minutes, by Cisco's watch, pounded with his fists, kicked, muffled screams down into the sand, till he was exhausted. And then Cisco helped get him up, take him home. Well, his star was on the rise. He was booking concerts, selling books. But a lot of historians will tell you that Kathy Ann's death marked the beginning of a decline in Woody's outlook and his health. Marjorie writes about fits where he would fall on the ground, sometimes even foaming at the mouth. Finally, one day, he didn't get back up, and they had to call an ambulance, took him to the hospital, and he stayed there for 6 months. The rest of Woody Guthrie's life would be an alternation of longer hospital stays with shorter times outside in the real world. Marjorie and Woody were already arguing, and they knew the medical debts would be gigantic. So they agreed to separate to spare the children the debt. Plus, Woody had already met Annika, the young woman in California who would become his third wife, although it was Marjorie who would return for his last few years to nursing. Gilbert Cisco Houston was still playing folk music up and down the West Coast when he got selected by the United States State Department for a cultural folk music exchange to India, of all places. They sent 3 Indian folk musicians here. We sent 3 American folk musicians there. He toured all throughout 1959, and he came back really happy, saying, "Man, that is the kind of thing that every country in the world ought to do a lot more of." It was, however, during the India trip that Cisco had started to experience serious regular abdominal pain. He joked to his friend folk singer Lee Hayes when he got back, "Oh, it's nothing. I probably just got cancer or something." Finally, the next year, 1960, he couldn't take the pain anymore, and he went to Cedars-Sinai, had exploratory surgery, and the diagnosis was inoperable late-stage cancer of the stomach. He played folk music all up and down the West Coast, Northern California, even here in Portland, all the way to the very end. And he had one last trip to make. 1961, he got on a plane somehow. Some friends helped him to go to Woody Guthrie's hospital in Brooklyn, where Woody by now was in the last stages of Huntington's chorea. Cisco made it up to Woody's room. Woody's just sort of laying in bed, staring ahead at the wall, which his family always kept papered with his poems and his drawings. Cisco was helped over to Woody, and he pushed that big head of curls back, reached down, kissed him on the forehead. Woody just stared straight ahead in response. Some friends helped him get down to the street, where a car picked him up, took him to the airport. When he finally arrived at the airport, cab door opened, and there was Jim. Some friends had arranged a surprise. Jim walked him through the airport. Two men knew it was the last time they'd see each other. At the stairs, up to the plane, they hugged. Cisco went back to his own hospice, Los Angeles. Gilbert Cisco Houston died April 3rd, 1961. He was 42 years old. Well, Woody Guthrie spent basically the last 10 years of his life as a ward of the state in Brooklyn. He had lots of visitors, including Pete Seeger, even a young Bob Dylan. But as summer began to turn to fall in 1967, word began to spread throughout the closely knit New York folk community that the end was probably near. Jim Longy, who had often kept in touch with Marjorie and had come to visit a lot, came to visit one last time. He did the same thing Cisco had done a few years before, pushed all those curls to the side, gave him a little kiss on the forehead. He leaned down, told Woody that he loved him, asked if he loved him back. He claims that Woody blinked his eyes, which was their sign for the affirmative. And overcome with emotion, the New York lawyer and politician who had been such a coward when their voyages had started but had become tough as nails as a result, even doing things like running for office in New York, unionizing the dock workers, and even writing part of the screenplay for On the Waterfront, had to leave the room. Woody Guthrie died on October 3rd, 1967. He was 55 years old. You know, the British talk about Arthur as their once and future king, meaning he's gone, but they believe their mythology is that he will come back in their greatest hour of need if England ever truly needs him. In many ways, I think of Woody Guthrie as our once and future bard. He left us in 1967, but if you'll permit me an indulgence, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that maybe as we sit here tonight, we may need Woody Guthrie's voice more than we ever have. His songs call us to do the hard work of being Americans, of rolling up our sleeves and keeping the promises that our founders and founding documents made to the less fortunate among us, to do the hard work of being Americans and to keep his memory alive. Now, we do that by telling his story, by reading his works, and, of course, by singing his songs. Especially this one. You had to know what I was going to end with, certainly. Now, when it comes to This Land Is Your Land, special case. My rules are the same as Woody's. Sing out loud, sing out strong, but only if you mean it. In other words, when you sing This Land Is Your Land, you got to mean it the way Woody meant it. This land is your land. Single sentence. Full stop. Period. No exclusions. No caveats. This land is your land if your people came across the Bering Strait in prehistoric times. This land is your land if your folks got here on the Mayflower. This land is your land if your people came here in the chains of a slave ship in 1619. This land is your land if your folks got here from Europe, fleeing famine and oppression. And this land is your land if you just got here. And this land is my land. You know, Woody always used to say, the reason I don't own a lot of stuff is because I don't want to take care of a lot of stuff. Now, that means Woody understood when you say something is yours, when you say you own it, you're not just saying you own it, you're taking responsibility for it. If you say something is yours, maybe that means you want to, I don't know, maybe take care of it. Maybe keep it clean. Maybe pass it on to the next people just a little bit better than you found it. I don't know. So if you can do those two things tonight, my friends, if you can sing This Land Is Your Land with no exclusions and full inclusion, if you can sing This Land Is My Land, not just with a sense of ownership, but also a sense of responsibility, well then, by God, sing along. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that rhythm of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Roamed and rambled, I've roamed and rambled, and I follow my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me, the voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land with you, come on. This land is your land, this land is my land. There you go. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. One bright sunny morning, in the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people as they stood hungry. I stood there wondering if God blessed America for me. Thank y'all so much. You're a great audience. I appreciate it. Thank you. You guys were really terrific. Thanks to the Artichoke for having me. See you next time.